American English, American English, American English webinar series. Teach and learn. American English webinar series.
Greetings, teachers from around the world. Welcome to this, our third webinar in American English Webinar Series 5, brought to you by the American English team at the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Let's start our session today with this great photo submitted by Gulnara Abdieva featuring English teachers at the Aga Khan School in Osh, Kyrgyzstan. They were participating during the last webinar 2 weeks ago. We love to see you all learning together, so please do keep sharing your webinar viewing photos by emailing them to americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org. We might just feature them in the next webinar. I'm Heather Benucci, also known as Moderator Heather, part of the American English team. You will see me and Moderator Katie in the chat box today during the webinar. We will be here to assist and support you as you participate. And here you can see the remaining schedule for Series 5. Our next webinar, Using Visual Literacy Skills to Encourage Communicative Language Practice, is by our very own moderator, Katie Subra. That will be in 2 weeks on March 1st. Our webinars are each 60 minutes long, and they are related to a theme on the American English website. The Teacher's Corner section from the website shown here features resources and lesson ideas related to the month's topic. The theme for this month, February, is journalism. Now let's take a quick review of how you will participate in the webinar. You will hear but not see the presenter, and the way you're going to participate is by typing in the chat box, as many of you are doing right now. The chat box is where you can ask questions or make comments related to today's topic. We might not be able to answer every question during the session because there are often hundreds of you participating. However, you can direct those questions to the Ning community, which we will cover in just a moment. The presenter will also ask you questions in the form of polls, either multiple choice or multiple answer, and those questions will appear on the screen for you to answer. And unfortunately, some of you might experience technical problems during the webinar. If we have a global issue, we will let you know. However, if you do lose sound, please try to follow along with the caption pod at the bottom of the screen if refreshing your internet browser does not correct the problem. Each series consists of 6 webinars, and during the series, the webinars will take place every other Wednesday. For those of you who attend at least 4 out of the 6 webinars in a series, you will receive an e-certificate from your regional English language office or local U.S. Embassy point of contact after the series ends. And to be sure that you are eligible for that certificate, we're going to ask you to submit your attendance at the very end of the webinar today. We will provide you with a link that you can follow, and you will fill out a form to record your attendance information. And we hope you are already members of the Ning community, but if you have not joined yet, please do register. It may take up to 72 hours to have that registration approved. But here on the Ning, you can find resources and discussion questions related to each webinar, as well as all of the webinar recordings and featured materials. The Ning is also a great place to ask the questions to the presenter after the webinar, and you can live chat with your fellow community members. We have over 11,000 members, so some great conversations can take place there. And finally, before we begin, I wanted to give you a quick reminder that our next Facilitative Massive Open Online Course, or MOOC, will begin on February 20th. This free MOOC is for those who are interested in learning more about using English for journalism. Participants will learn skills related to reading, drafting, editing, and proofreading in the field of journalism. And for more information, including how to register, please follow the link that is shown here and being shared in the chat box by moderator Katie. And now on to today's webinar, Voice of America, Current Event Activities in the English Language Classroom. Today we will examine how to use resources from Voice of America to teach current events in the English Language Classroom. In today's globalized world of the 24-hour news cycle, teaching current events has become more important than ever in the English language classroom. Our presenter is going to share a variety of teaching content and educational resources from Voice of America, or VOA, along with specific strategies for incorporating this content in your English language classes. And I am happy to welcome back Philip Dierking, our presenter today. Phil began his career as an English teacher in France, and he's gone on to teach and train teachers in Djibouti, Togo, Benin, Equatorial Guinea, and the United States. Phil is currently a writer and content developer for Voice of America Learning English. His interests include pedagogical issues and under-resourced classroom environments, including teaching large classes and gender equality in the classroom. Originally from Juneau, Alaska, Philip holds a Master's of Art in TESOL from the University of Washington. Welcome back, Phil.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar titled Voice of America Current Event Activities in the English Language Classroom. I'm Phil, and I'm happy to be able to speak to you today about this topic. Current events are something that I feel is extremely important in today's world. With so many changes happening across the globe, it's more important than ever that all students are aware of what's happening both in their own country and beyond. Fortunately, current events can be also an extremely useful tool for your English classes. There are literally hundreds of activities that you can create using current events. And today I'll be talking about one great resource that I really think you will all find very helpful for your classes, and that is Voice of America. Before we begin, however, I'd like to touch base on that poll we took. And the first poll question was, have you ever used Voice of America news resources in your EFL classroom? Yes or no? And looking at the poll, it looked like quite a lot of you said no. And watching the chat box right now, it looks like that is the case. And so this is actually great because that means there's a lot for you to learn in this webinar, and I'm really happy to introduce it to you. And for those of you who said yes, I'm really happy to hear that, and I would love to hear your experiences about it in the chat box as we talk about the activities. All right, let's look at the second poll question. Which current events topic are your students most interested in? And the options I gave you were world politics, the global economy, local news, science and technology, local or global education stories, and arts and entertainment. So, looking at your responses from before and in the chat box now, it looks like there's a large majority of you are saying science and technology as well as arts and entertainment. I'm seeing a few world politics thrown in there, but generally it looks like science and tech and arts and entertainment are the most commonly used, or that your students are most interested in. So that's really good information and interesting to know. And I think, luckily, Voice of America covers both those topics really well. So thank you all for sharing your feedback. Okay. So before we jump into examples, I wanted to talk about our objectives for today. Participants in this session should, by the end, be able to understand what current events are and why they are important. They should also be able to learn about the benefit of using current events in the English language classroom. They also should be able to learn about Voice of America and the different resources it offers English language teachers. And finally, participants should be able to learn how to use Voice of America resources in the English language classroom. Okay, so before showing you activities and the resources, let's get a little bit of an introduction to current events, what they are and why they are important. So first question about current events is, what are they? what is the definition of current events? And I'd like to ask the participants to share any ideas they have in the chat box. I see learn facts, I see news, events that are happening right now, news, excellent. And that's just like what I defined it as, events in the present concerning important people, places, things, or ideas. Now, current events are often captured in the news, and to define news for you, news is a report of recent events, information, people, or things that's often recorded in print, radio, television, or online. One other term I wanted to talk about is the media, and the word media is often used when talking about current events. What media is the industries and people that produce news and mass communication content. Okay, so the next question I have for our participants are why teach current events in the English language classroom? Why would this be important? Please think about this, and if you have any answers, please put them in the chat box. Okay, we have relevant, we have from Yolam, we have get their students' attention. Mohammed from Libya says up-to-date language, excellent. Nelly from Mexico says because it is meaningful, great. Also seeing someone say social media, excellent. Authentic learners, great. These are all really great suggestions. And a lot of my ideas are the exact same. So the list that I had was they build a language ability in reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills. They build new vocabulary. Now, as current events are current, that means that it's new events and new news that's happening. And since every day there are new stories, there are going to be an abundance of new words that come about that are important for your students to learn. Okay. They offer endless topics that connect to all areas of curriculum. You can take the current events in the news and adapt it to any subject in English language that you're teaching. They keep students aware of events happening locally, nationally, and internationally. And one that I think is important is they promote critical thinking. Since current events usually are interesting topics, I think an advantage of them is that they really can inspire and encourage debate or discussion in your classes, which can be very useful for discussion activities or writing activities, and it requires students to express what they think and how they feel in English. They also motivate students to have further discussions with friends and family, and one of our goals as English teachers is to try to encourage our students to use English outside of class. This is a great way to motivate them to continue this discussion with friends and family outside the class in English. And even if it's in their first language, it's also valuable because they're talking about important things. And lastly, I said it can inspire students to become active in their communities. And if certain events or current events are topics that are specifically important or interesting to your students, it may inspire them to, outside of class, become more active and involved in that topic. So as you can see, there are a large range of benefits teachers have for using current events in their classroom. The one thing to add to that is as teachers, or as English language teachers, it's up to each of us individually to decide what current events and news items are the most appropriate for our classroom context. Okay. So where can you access current events? There's a whole lot of places that you can find these. You can get them in the internet, you can find them in newspapers, you can find them in magazines, you can find them on television, you can find them on radio, social media, and podcasts. And the last two I wanted to talk about, in today's world, social media has actually become a really great way to learn about current events because with mobile phones or smartphones, When people are in places where news or interesting things happen, they're more likely to upload them to their Facebook account, their Twitter account, or YouTube, and make them accessible to everybody. So more and more, social media becomes a great place to go to learn what's happening right now. And podcasts is another thing that has become very popular in the last several years. And these are audio programs that focus on a specific theme. Now, we'll be talking more about podcasts later, so I'll wait till then to discuss it. But now what I'd like to do is take some time to introduce all of you to the organization called Voice of America. Now, specifically, I want to focus more on the branch that's called Learning English, but I will talk about it in just a moment. But basically, I really think you will find that Voice of America can offer an abundance of excellent resources for your classroom, teaching the news and English language. One thing to know is that Voice of America is often referred to as VOA, so I will be using that term VOA throughout this presentation. Okay. First, I'll give you some background information on Voice of America. It was created in 1942 in order to provide comprehensive news and information to audiences worldwide. It is the largest U.S. international broadcaster, and it provides news in over 40 languages to over 200 million people a week. So it provides news not just in English, but in also many other languages. So Voice of America produces content for both digitally, for television, and radio platforms. So you can access it in many different ways. You can access it online, you can access it from mobile phones, from social media, from satellite or cable television, or even from FM or MW radio. So there are many ways to get access to Voice of America. Maybe not all of these work for you, but I'm sure at least one of these will. The other thing I should mention is it also has a network of 2,300 affiliate stations. There's a lot of TV access too. Here's a list of all of Voice of America's, the languages that Voice of America produces and broadcasts its news in. As a question for the audience, please raise your hand if you see a language that is spoken in your home country. Oh, well, we have a lot of hands that are going up. This is excellent. I'm sure not all of you will find one, but it looks like there's quite a bit that have. Excellent. Please put your hands down. But what I really wanted to take time to tell you about today is the branch of Voice of America called Learning English. Learning English is VOA's multimedia source of news for English language learners. So it's accessed primarily online, and it writes news stories or audio podcasts and programs targeted for English levels for intermediate and upper beginning learners. So the idea is that we want the largest amount of people possible to be able to access our content. So we don't want it to be at a level that not everyone can understand. Now, on our website, we have online texts, we have MP3 audio clips, we have videos, and we also have podcasts as well. So we have a lot of different resources. Now, as a little history, it began in 1959, and it has grown to include not just news, but also educational and teaching tools as well. And it is read by English language learners, by teachers, by educational publishers, and read by pretty much anyone interested in the news. And our content is drawn from the world of news, business, science, U.S. life, popular culture, etc. We cover many different broad areas of information. Now, one thing that I think is especially helpful for you is that all the texts, MP3 audios, videos, and photos on our website are free to the public. You can use these however you want for promotional purposes, for your classroom, for homework. All you have to do is give credit to learningenglish.voanews.com. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what this organization is, I want to talk about the resources. And we have many different resources at Voice of America, but probably the largest resource are the news stories. So we have, like I said, we have stories that cover a lot of different topics. They cover general news, education, health and lifestyle, personal technology, science in the news, and also what's trending. Each day we have a What's Trending Today article. The other great thing about our news articles is that they're actually organized into 3 levels of difficulty. So if you look at the blue bar at the top of the page, if you look within the red circle, you'll see level 1, level 2, and level 3. This is where you can go to select news articles of different levels. Now, the nice thing about our news articles is we also have a Learning English word book. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's available for free on our website to download. And what it is a mini dictionary that includes definitions to most of the words that we use in our articles. And it primarily focuses on words that are relevant to current events. So this is a great resource to use when looking through and reading our articles. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between the 3 levels in our stories. So our level 1 news stories, these are for beginning English learners. And these articles generally have only 1 idea per sentence, with maybe about 500 words or less. And as I said, all the words should be in that Learning English book, but if they are not, we usually explain them at the bottom of the story. If you look to the image to the right, you will see the words in our story section. This is at the end of every article and explains new or complicated words, which is great for people reading our stories because you can learn new vocabulary this way. Okay, level 2. These are for intermediate learners of American English. These stories are often more than 500 words and may use a little more complex sentences or language. The new words, like in level 1, are explained at the bottom of the story, but we also include audio from newsmakers, and so you will hear the writers reading the story in our audio clips, and they may also include clips from interviews done for the stories, which make great listening tools. The other neat thing about some of these stories at level 2 is that there may be a quiz to test your understanding. So if you look at that image to the right, you will see a picture of one of our quizzes for a science story. And you can see it's about 5 questions, so it's not very long. You can have your students take the quiz, or you can use the questions yourself in your own class as a reading or listening comprehension activity. Now, level 3 stories are our highest level, and they're aimed at non-native English speakers who have studied American English or American Style English and wish to improve their reading and listening skills. So these articles are usually more than 500 words in length and may also include audio from newsmakers. And if you look at the image to the right, you will see in the red circle where you can actually click the audio and hear the recorded version of our news stories. Now, level 3 definitely might use more complex sentences or language. But like all of our stories, new words are explained at the bottom of the article. Now, one other feature that I like, that I think is really helpful, is our comment section. At the bottom of every story, we encourage comments from our readers. We usually ask a question to prompt the discussion, and people can write their responses. They can write questions to the author, they can write their thoughts, they can answer the question. People can respond to comments, and the writers themselves usually respond to their readers' comments. So we try to make it an interactive experience. And we also moderate all the comments, so we try to keep the conversation productive and helpful. Okay, well, now I want to spend some time talking about how you can use Learning English news stories in your classroom. And as I said before, there are hundreds of activities that you can use or that you can create with current events. They'll teach listening, speaking, reading, writing, or even grammar. Now, if you watched last week's webinar, you probably learned many great activities. However, I'm going to show you a few more that I think will be very helpful for your class and how you can use VOA news articles. Now, when using news articles, it's very important that you teach your students how news or how information is organized in the story. Now, you may remember from last webinar learning about the inverted pyramid. And what this means is it basically explains how in a news article, the most important information is at the top, or the beginning of the story. The less important is in the middle, and the least important is at the end of the story. Well, one other very important concept I want to teach you about news stories is called the 5 W's. And they stand for who, what, when, where, and why. They are the 5 most important questions that every news story answers, which is who is the story about, what happened, when did the story take place, where did the story take place, and why did it happen. These are extremely important because if you understand these or can find this information, you generally can understand the most important parts of the story. And if you teach your students to identify this information, there's a greater chance they can understand the article. And usually this is found in the first few paragraphs of a story anyways. Okay, well, let's do a couple practice activities I want to show you for how you can use VOA stories in your classrooms. And for this example, I want to use an article I wrote for Voice of America called How Well is English Spoken Worldwide? So it's an article I did that reviewed the results of a survey an organization took about the English level of 72 countries in the world, and it ranked all 72. Now, as I said, with news stories, they make great reading comprehension or listening comprehension if you have access to the audio. And what I think is really helpful is to have your students listen and try to identify the 5 W's. So they can do this by looking at the text and underlining the parts where they see the 5 W's, underlining who the story is about, what it's about, etc. Or they can have a chart where they can listen and then as soon as they hear the answers, they can put it in the chart. So here's an idea of what I was thinking. What I'm going to do is I'm going to both have this text up here for you to read along, and I'm also going to speak it to give you an example of what this exercise would look like if it was a listening comprehension. So I'm going to, as I read this, take the next 30 seconds to think about the 5 W's. Who is this story about? What is it about? When did it happen? Where did it happen? And why did it happen? Okay, everybody? Let's begin. On Tuesday, the private education company, Education First, or EF, released the 2016 English Proficiency Index report online. The English Proficiency Index is based on the online test scores of 950,000 adults from 72 countries. The results do not show the English ability of a country's entire population. They are based on people who took an online test, the EF Standard English Test, or FSET, during 2015. The study is the 6th produced by EF. It is a yearly report that examines the English knowledge level of adults from 72 countries. Okay, so let's think about that for a moment. If I were to ask you who is this story about, what do you think your answer would be? And if you have an idea, please write it in the chat box. Who is this story about? Ooh, we're having a lot of people say EF or Education First. Excellent. That is exactly what I wanted people to say. The who is the private education company, Education First. So you can either underline it in the text or in this chart write in the answer, depending if what kind of activity you're doing. All right, well now what happened? What happened in this story? we ran a survey. We have someone writing English proficiency test, English proficiency index, EPI. Excellent. Correct. What happened is they released the 2016 English proficiency index report online. So I have it underlined and written in. This is when did it happen? 2015. Okay, excellent. Some people said 2016, and we have Tuesday. So very good responses, and what I had put is Tuesday because the story is that it was released, and it was released on Tuesday. So I'm going now to just give you the answers for the next two because we want to make sure we have enough time for everything. It happened online, and why it happened was that it was released to examine the English knowledge level of adults from 72 countries. So this gives you an idea of just how you can very easily do exercises to teach your students how to identify the most important information in a story. Now, I think this makes a great interactive jigsaw activity that you can do with your whole class. So I'm going to explain how that would work. Let's take your class, and in this image, these 9 blue squares represent students in a class. What you would do is you would assign each student a number. Now, since this class is small, we'll just give them numbers 1 through 3. Then, have your students get in groups with the same number. So everyone who had a number 1 will sit in one group, everyone who had a number 2 will sit in another group, and everyone with number 3 will sit in their group. Then give each group a different news story, and have the groups analyze the story. And when they analyze it, have them try to identify the 5 W's. They can read it by themselves and then discuss it in a group. And so hopefully after a certain amount of time, they will at least understand the basics of what the story is about. Then, after you feel that they're finished with that, you can assign each person in each group a letter. So it would look like this. There's one person in each group is an A, one person in each group is a B, and also a C. Then, you would have students get in groups by their letter. So it should look like this. Everyone with the letter A is in one group, everyone with the letter B is in one group, and everyone with the letter C is in a group. Each person in the group should have read a different story. So if you look, each person comes from a different group and read a different story and has a different thing to share. Now, in these new groups, have each person take turns summarizing their story to the group. This is great because by the end of this activity, all of your students have been exposed to several different news stories. And this can be a great thing to do if you just took today's news, and by the end of this activity, they'll have a good understanding of what happened today in the news. And again, this requires both reading and speaking and listening comprehension. Okay. Moving on to another resource, I wanted to take some time to tell you about something we have called the Learning English Podcast. It is a daily, so first, before I talk about it, a podcast is an audio program that focuses on a specific topic. And in this one, this focuses on the news. It's a daily podcast that summarizes the most important news items of the day. And before I continue further with it, I'm going to have you listen to about a minute of it to give you an idea of how it sounds.
Welcome to Learning English, a daily 30-minute program from the Voice of America. I'm Jonathan Evans.
And I'm Ashley Thompson. This program is aimed at English learners, so we speak a little slower and we use words and phrases especially written for people learning English.
We also explain words and language rules, all while bringing you stories and information from around the world. Today on the program, Ann Ball will have this week's Science in the News report, and Steve Ember will bring us another edition of The Making of a Nation. But
Okay. Now, these podcasts are about 20 to 30 minutes, so we don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but this at least gives you an idea of how it sounds. Now, these are available to download, so you can download them, and they're available in 4 different file sizes. So depending what your internet connection is, we have different versions to make it easier for you. Now, there's many different activities you can do with a podcast. With something like this, you could easily, if you have the ability to play it in class, you could have your students listen, and you could do a weekly listening and comprehension quiz so that they can be caught up on keywords or events happening in the news. But something that I think can be really fun for your class is to make podcasts in your class. Now, my idea for how to do this is you would have either a group podcast or a class podcast. In a group podcast, you would put your students in groups and have each student in a group research a current event and write a news story. And then you could have your group record themselves reading each of the news stories. Where you have each group research one current event per group and write a news story, and then you record each group reading their news story. So if the English level of your class is a little lower, then maybe just have the whole group work on one story. If it's a little higher, then maybe each person in the group. Now, the nice thing about this is if you have the ability to record it, you can make an audio podcast like you just heard. But if you don't, then you can easily have them read these stories aloud as a role play of their own radio show. It's just as effective and just as fun and dynamic. Okay. Another really interesting resource I want to tell you about is our News Words video series. These are 1-minute videos that teach new words in the news using a short news story. And they're very helpful ways to learn vocabulary from current events in the context that they are used. So before I tell more about activities, I want to play one of these for you so you get an idea of what they look like.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words.
This week's news word is about housing built in a shipping port. Practical.
Urban rigor is the name of a new low-price type of housing for students at the University of Copenhagen. It is built using recycled shipping containers. It sits on top of solid materials that float.
You can make your food, you can take a shower, you have a toilet, you have a bed, you have pretty much everything you need. So it's very practical for the student.
Practical means fit for actual use.
It refers to the doing or using of something instead of theories and ideas.
Okay. So that gives you an idea of what it looks like. It's very simple. Takes one word from a short news story, gives you the word, gives you the news story, and then with the word used in it, and then it defines the word after. So it's an interesting way to teach a new word. And if you have the ability to play these in your class, these are great ways for students to learn a word. You could have them watch 5 of these, and it's only 5 minutes, and they learn 5 new words, and you could do vocabulary activities like having to put the words in new sentences or synonyms. But again, another idea that I had that I think would be really interesting is to do this with your class, like the podcasts, and have your students make their own news word story. So what you could do is create a list of vocabulary from current events. So we'll take an example from the story we saw and use the word practical. Then put your students in groups and give each group a word, and then have them find a news article that uses the example or uses the vocabulary word you gave them. So in this example, we took the story Students Live in Floating Shipping Containers by Deborah Block. Then, have your students create a presentation like we just saw where they define the word and read part of the news story that uses the word. Now, you can, if you have the technology, you can record and make little videos, and that's a lot of fun. But even if you don't, these can make great class presentations or role plays. They just have to give the word, give the news story, and then define the word at the end. And another great interactive activity. So one really neat idea that I also liked, so we have all sorts of media on our website, and one resource is called This Day in Photos. And every day there's about 3 to 4 photos from current events happening that are posted on our website. And photos make great, interesting activities. And what I think is neat about them is you can actually use them to do a lot of good critical thinking activities. And I think what's helpful is to show a photo and then give your students questions that encourage or inspire discussion or debate. What I like to do is show the photo but don't give a definition and ask the students what they think the photo is about. As simple as that. And I find that it's a very interesting way to promote a lot of discussion. I also sometimes like to ask them the question, what do you think the title of it, or if you could give this photo a title, what would you give it? So let's try and practice this as a group. Look at this photo to the right. So like I said, here are 2 questions. What do you think is happening in this photo and why? And what title would you give this photo? So think about this, and as you think of answers, please put them in the 2 chat boxes. The one on the left is for what's happening, and the one on the right is what title would you give it? All right. We have people for the right saying it's a ritual, current event in the Middle East, sharpening, a ritual. So we have ceremonial ritual. On the right, a lot of people are giving titles like culture, a native ritual, cleaning of a sword, tradition. Excellent. Paula Printo says it's a ceremony for warriors. Great idea, Paula. Okay, well, we're getting lots of really good ideas and responses, so I think you get an idea of how the activity should go. Thank you, everyone, for participating. This is excellent ideas. As you can see, it's really fun to try to think about the answers to these 2 questions, and I think you will find it's easy to get your class excited by it. Well then, what's fun to do after this is to actually give your class the definition and see how close they were to the right answer. So in this case, a ceremony participant spits water on a sword as he takes part in Hai Nik Ta, or the procession of spirits, which marks the end of the celebration of the Lunar New Year for the Chinese community in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. So then with your class, you could have an opportunity to see how close everyone was. Excellent. Really great participation, everybody. Okay. And so we also have a great video series, and we call it Learning English TV. And before I do that, basically we have all sorts of news stories that not only do we read at a good level that students can understand, we also caption them or give them subtitles, so you can see the words to to the story as we go along. And it makes them really great as both a listening and reading comprehension activity. And there are many ways you can use these in class. One of the easiest is to give listening comprehension questions. And what I like to do before showing videos is give my students a pre-video question. Something that I think is fun is to give them the title of the video and ask them what do they think the video is going to be about. And then I give them comprehension questions to answer while they're watching the video. So let's try this together. And then after that, I will follow with a post-video response, either written or discussion. So let's try this together. And here are the 3 days. I will show a video, and I will give you the title, and I'll give you some post-comprehension questions. So the video title is 3D printers allow Tanzania hospital to make artificial limbs quickly. What do you think the video will be about? Share your ideas in the chat box. Before you see the video, what do you think this video will discuss based on the title? So our answers: Nelly from Mexico says medicine. Edison from Quito says prosthetics. Mai from Vietnam says technology. Great, great ideas. Excellent, everybody. Okay, excellent work. A lot of technology and innovation. Good. Well, let's go ahead and watch the video. And while you watch the video, you will see a chat box for the discussion question, which is, how did Pendo get her new prosthetic leg? All right. As soon as you know the answers, write them in the box.
Today is a good day for Pendo James. The 15-year-old is walking without her crutches.
When I walk using a prosthesis, I can do anything. Where we live, there are many hills, so with the crutches, I can fall, get bruises, and many problems.
Pendo got the prosthesis for free as part of a pilot program at the CCBRT hospital in Dar es Salaam. The hospital partnered with NIA Technologies, a Canadian startup. The company installed the technology and trained local technicians to use the software.
We scan, like we're taking video on a patient, and when you have the picture in here, we move it to the computer. The computer is installed with a certain program for modification or rectification. So whenever I command to print, then the device that has been modified will be printed in the printers.
The technology's portability is a big advantage.
Okay, I would love to have time to watch the whole video, but I want to make sure we have enough time to tell you everything about. I saw great answers: 3D printers, hospital program, technology. All really, really good ideas. Excellent, everybody. Thank you for participating. And then you can easily follow this with a written activity or discussion with questions like, what are your reactions to this video? What did you think of this new technology? The options are endless. One other idea I had is we also on our website, pretty much all the videos are also available without subtitles. And something that I think is a neat activity is to show the video without subtitles and to also turn down the sound so that they can't see the subtitles, they can't hear what it's about, and they have to guess. You can have them get in groups and discuss what do they think the video is about. And they can write their own news story just by seeing the video silently. So it's kind of like the this day in photo activity, except it's with a video. So as you can see, these options are really endless. Okay. There's a few other activities that come up that are inspired by the videos that I think are great for your classrooms. And one is interviews. You can assign your students to write a current events story for class. You can require them to have at least one interview for the story. This can be in the class or outside of the class. And this requires both listening and speaking skills. And this gives them the opportunity to hear different accents in English. And it's a way to get your students out of their desks and interacting with people and using authentic language. Okay. You can also do such activities as role plays. Now, you can assign your students a current event topic, and in groups, you can have your students research the topic and write their own summary, and then you can have them make a skit and present the current events as a newscaster. We talked about a lot of different ways you can do role plays, and I think it's always fun to have them both research and write the stories and then present them in class as if they're a newscaster. So again, another great way that even if you can't show the video or make a video, you can still present this in class and have it be just as effective. And as just a side note, if you want to create more speaking opportunities, if you do this as a group activity, you can have them present multiple news stories within their group. Okay, so before we continue, we've had a lot of resources that I've talked about, And I'm interested in which do you think you're most likely to use in your class? Identifying the 5 W's, News Jigsaw, class podcast creation, This Day in Photos activity, learning English TV activities, interviews, or role plays. Well, it looks like many of you are saying identifying the 5 W's, and we also have a lot of responses for This Day in Photos. Also learning English TV, we have a lot there, but it looks like the majority of you are saying identifying the 5 W's. Excellent. All right, well, I'm glad to know some of these can be useful for you all. Thank you for giving your opinions. Well, one last thing I wanted to share is I have an idea of how you can take some of the different activities I have suggested and put them together to make a great and interesting class project focusing on current events and teaching all the skills. First, you can put students in groups and assign them a current event. Then in groups, students can research the current event and find the information to answer the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, and why. The students can then go out and interview people outside of class for the story. Students take their research and then they can end interviews and write summaries of the story in news form. And then they can present their current event summary as a role play as newscasters. So if you look at this, you can see that this works on reading and listening and speaking, writing, and again, speaking. You can easily do a very great class activity that is very helpful for your students to learn English and keeps them engaged. Okay. Well, we're almost out of time, but there's a few other learning English resources that I wanted to talk about that aren't directly related to current events, but they're very helpful for you as teachers, and I think it's be useful for you to know about them. So I wanted to point them out on our website. And these, again, are all available on our website. There's the Let's Learn English video series. This is a video series they're 5-minute episodes released each week when they follow the adventures of Anna Mateo in Washington, D.C. And I believe many of you in the pre-webinar discussion mentioned that some of you have seen this video series before. So each of these videos come with the text, so you can use that in your class. It's the script, actually, so you could have role plays in your class. And they also come with a listening or reading comprehension quiz. You can see an image for that on the left. They also come with a downloadable worksheet that you can do based off the listening. And they also have speaking and pronunciation practice videos. And they have a whole lesson plan. So in each one of these video series, you can create a whole lesson plan for your class. We also have the People in America video series. And this is a short 5-minute video series that features interesting or important people in the United States. And they each come with a listening comprehension quiz as well. We also have the Everyday Grammar TV series and podcast series. And these are very useful. Each one discusses an English grammar concept. The video series is very interesting and interactive. And the podcast series is audio, but you also have the text. So you can use this and read this in your class as a lesson. So for you grammar teachers out there, this is a great resource to add some very interactive and dynamic media to your classroom. Okay, let's review what we talked about today. We talked about a lot of different points. So hopefully, by the end of this, all of you participants can now understand what current events are and why they are important. You can learn about the benefit of using current events in the English language classroom. You can learn about, and you've learned about Voice of America and the different resources it offers English language teachers. And you can learn how to use Voice of America resources in the English language classroom. So we've really covered a lot of ground today. A few last things I wanted to mention. Here's a list of resources, and these are websites on the internet that are great places to find current event or information on current events, and a lot of them are intended for English language teachers. This will be available on the PowerPoint once the PowerPoint is available on the Ning. So as you can see, there is Voice of America, the regular Voice of America. You also have VOA Learning English, so this is the section of Voice of America we talked about today. There's also Breaking News English. This is a great resource. I've used it a lot myself as a teacher. They have a lot of different news stories and activities in a lot of different levels. There's also the New York Times, the Learning Network blog, another great resource that has a lot of different activities for teachers. There's News in Levels, EnglishClub.com, and Education World. And there's many, many others, but these are some of the ones that I just wanted to recommend right now. So very good resources for you to use in your class. And if you have other ideas, please share them on the Ning. Here are some of the references that I used for my presentation today. And other than that, I mostly wanted to say thank you for attending. I hope to see you on the Ning. And as I said before, this is just a topic that I find so important, but also it can be so helpful to all of you as teachers. And before we finish, is there any questions perhaps that any of you have about some of these resources that I could answer right now? Looking, see if there's any questions. Well, it looks like this will be really helpful for all of you. That's great. Remember that everything you can download, the videos you can download, and the audio you can download, and you can also download the photos as well. And you can download them in many different file sizes as well. So they're all very accessible. Excellent. Well, if there's no other questions, if you think of them, please include them on the webinar discussion or the post-webinar discussion group on the Ning. And good luck out there in your classes. And I hope that this has been helpful. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much, Phil. You really gave us a practical summary of many diverse multimedia EFL resources from Voice of America. And you showed us a lot of current event activity ideas, and I think we can adapt those with the VOA content that we select in order to be most relevant to our learners, our contexts, and our cultural settings. So thank you for sharing all those resources, and for our audience out there, all of those links will be available for you on the Ning. And speaking to our audience, I want to say a big thank you to you, our participants, for being so active with sharing your ideas, thoughts, and experiences today. We look forward to learning with you again in 2 weeks on March 1st with our very own moderator, Katie Subra, who's going to explore the topic of using visual literacy skills to encourage communicative language practice. Excellent. All right. And now it is time